It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Craig, it was announced by President Trump that he was in favor of turning over Gaza to the United States, perhaps for some beach development projects. But at the end of the day, this is starting to look very strategic on the part of the president, where some of this outrageous foreign policy stuff is sucking out all the other conversations, including, the 300 or 400 executive actions the president's taken. Do you see that?
Well, I think if there's a strategy, it kind of falls under the heading of news domination. He knows from his experience that he can go out and dominate the news coverage for a few days with these extraordinary statements and executive orders. But I don't. What I don't see is a broader strategy for the Middle East or for our conduct of foreign policy. The announcement about Gaza, and I'm guilty as a former secretary to the cabinet in the White House. I'm guilty of being partial to process, and a process on any major announcement needs to involve the gathering of supporters and allies. You need to inform people what's coming. This was just right out of the blue, and many I'm sure have seen, but if they haven't, this picture of his chief of staff literally standing next to President Trump in the Oval Office as he was talking about Gaza with this horrified look on her face. Whatever she was thinking, it certainly wasn't, you're doing a great job laying out this new policy we agreed to. It looked like total surprise. Our friends throughout the Middle East are first shocked and secondly uniformly opposed to the idea. Republicans on the Hill are opposed to the idea. I saw a statement from Rand Paul saying, I thought this was a campaign to bring back the notion of America first. And we're dealing with all this in the midst of dire situation and destruction by fire in Southern California, and suddenly we're going to rebuild Gaza. I don't think he has any appreciation for exactly what it would take to do that. I think he knew he would dominate the news coverage. I think he knew that he would cause a discussion about all this. I'm kind of surprised that I'm beginning to think of them as enablers rather than just talking about how absurd this is. They talk about, well, it may not happen, but there's going to be constructive discussion. Well, this is not the way you go about creating constructive discussion. So I don't know. To your point, is there a strategy? He wants to dominate the news. It looks like, on a daily basis, he's going to try to find a way to do that. I'm not sure what can come of it. I'll give you another example is the roundup of illegal immigrants. Big story, big news, photos on the news, every night on the news. Now they're saying that, well, they're beginning to release some of these people back. I mean, I don't even know how long he can stick with any of these initiatives once they're announced. But yeah, makes for good daytime television, I guess.
Al, is this just another case of Trump spontaneous policymaking, or is this starting to look very well crafted?
I don't think it looks very well crafted, but I do think there's a strategy behind it, and I think Craig put his finger on it. It's to get attention. It's to dominate the news every day. It used to be in the old days in politics, the people who wanted to dominate the news every day without looking ahead always got themselves in trouble in the long run. I used to have that fight all the time when I was director of the House Democratic Caucus. Everybody wanted the day's headlines. I said, let's worry about what the headlines are in October and November of the election year. and build to having the headlines we want at that time. But today's world is different. And Trump is he's a master of reality TV. Everything's television, and he has been on the air constantly since he's taken the oath of office, which is kind of bizarre that he took an oath to the Constitution because he doesn't seem to ever want to follow it. But if you think about it, he's on the air, whether it's accusing DEI for an airplane crash, or no matter how outrageous it is, it gets him attention, and it diverts from some of the real things that he's doing that are more, that could really be dangerous. I mean, we talked for a long time in November and December about these dangerous cabinet members that he's put up. He puts up, somebody uses Russian talking points for director of national intelligence. He puts up an anti-vaxxer for secretary of HHS. He has some clown that has already been confirmed for secretary of defense. And they're all going to get through. Just a brief word about Gaza. Think about this, too. He wants to move the Palestinians in Gaza to Jordan and Egypt. Well, Jordan and Egypt have had experience with Palestinians, and they don't want them because with the Palestinians comes whatever the version of Hamas is. It used to be the PLO and Yasser Arafat for Jordan in the 1970s or 1960s and 70s, and in 2011 and 12 in Egypt, it was the Muslim Brotherhood. And Morsi, who actually got elected president. And so there's a history there. The Jordanian regime would fall if there were more Palestinians, most likely fall if there were more Palestinians in Jordan. King Hussein, who's, I guess, the grandfather of the current king, kicked the Palestinians out, went to war, civil war in Jordan in 1970. After because the PLO had relocated after the 1967 war, relocated in Jordan, and they kicked them out by going to war.
Yes,
they don't want them. They don't want them back. What happened in Egypt? The Great Arab Spring turned into the equivalent of Hamas being elected in Gaza. The Muslim Brotherhood, Mohammed Morsi, got elected president.
No.
Egypt didn't like that. The military had a coup, and Sisi came back in as president. So you're not going to get any. The truth is, when you really look at it, is that those Arab countries are happy to put money into Gaza, but they'd rather have the Palestinians be the Israelis' problem.
Yeah.
And so the question, so Trump wants to disrupt that, but you don't disrupt it because you get a whim.
Yeah.
And I read a piece last night by Maggie Haberman and a number of other reporters who know him well in the New York Times that said he didn't discuss this with anybody. He talked about it a little bit, but didn't put it through any policy process or anything like that. And it also serves him well because this is going to be the topic for the next 3 or 4 days. And during that time, you're going to see Tulsi Gabbard and RFK confirmed.
Craig, I want to talk about another interesting phenomenon that's going on in D.C. What is wrong with Elon Musk using some of his talented colleagues to go into the payment systems of the IRS and Medicare? I mean, these are some of the brightest people trying to save the government money. What strikes you as good or bad about that?
Well, first of all, we don't know a whole lot about his talented colleagues, except they range in age from 19 to 24 years old, I think. So you have to ask yourself what kind of credentials they're bringing to the task at hand. I think that the Elon Musk story is not on a favorable trajectory. he's beginning to lose support even among Republicans for the way in which he's going about things. I feared he, knows little about the United States Agency for International Development, and decided, talk to the president supposedly, and they decided to shut it down. That is a big issue and has had broad-based bipartisan support for a number of years. And it's causing, I saw last night, the head of USAID from the George W. Bush years when he was president, it was just adamant about what an insane move this was, that this is the one agency that is pro-business, supported by business. It multiplies the work it does with support from other organizations. It increases private sector solutions, on and on and on. Point being that Musk storming into these departments and agencies and getting access to payrolls and access to information is just, it's unseemly at best and probably illegal. The story is out there that he was fined, or his space organization was fined $700,000 by the FAA for violating FAA standards, and that he therefore forced a very able FAA administrator to resign on January 20th. What would we think if it was the chairman of Boeing who didn't like the fines they had to pay, going in and starting removing officials of independent agencies? So, I just don't think that he's on a path to build support for what Trump is trying to do. And they're also going after targets where, is there waste and fraud in some of these places? Yes, there is. There always has been, but it's a small fraction of what's spent. There are people in place, including inspectors general, by the way, which they got rid of a lot of those people with the most experience who go after that sort of thing. Yeah. And when you add it all up, there's not going to be much money, but there's going to be a political cost to this, which causes me to want to go back to some of the points Al was making. When you go through and look at the compilation of what Trump is doing on his own and what he's doing with Musk, you have to ask yourself, when you ask about strategy, and the strategy is making news, but does that news add up day after day, week after week, to a stronger presidency, to the perception that's going to bring a broader base of support for Trump? I think not. I think he's going to keep the 30% or whatever it is of absolute true believers, but he is not building his base by these actions. And that's what I think people need to keep their eye on. Where are we going to be a year from now? If this is the pace in 2 weeks, where are we going to be a year from now? Yeah. And the disruption is not something the American people wanted. A dozen eggs for $9 is not what they want. Higher prices from tariffs is not what they want. Elimination of the ability to sell crops to Canada is not what they want. And yet, yes, it makes news. He dominates the news. But I do not think he's building a governing constituency by the way in which these two fellows are going about this.
Al, you have the last word this week.
Well, first of all, I agree with what Craig said. Matt Bai has a column today in the Washington Post about some 19-year-old who's part of Elon Musk's team. Matt speculated that he's probably going to go to jail because Musk says it's illegal to reveal his team while he's revealing secrets about FBI agents and CIA agents. The Musk team, I'm sure, knows a lot about technology and the digital world and all the things that people our age have no clue about. But they don't know a damn thing about democracy or government. And unfortunately, they're in a world of democracy and government, and as imperfect and as slow and as democracy and government work, and particularly our government, in the end, I think they're going to find that they'll probably done some damage, but they won't have done a lot of good, and they won't be very close to their goals. But what they've done, they pick easy targets. AID is an easy target. you can do any poll, and what do the people want to see cuts in? 4 and 8. They go after the bureaucrats. Bureaucrats, bureaucrats are a bad name. Government workers, have are felt a little better, but you call everybody a bureaucrat. I mean, go back to George Wallace and the pointy-headed bureaucrats. I mean, that's what their targets have been, and they do it with, as Trump. I mean, this retribution rampage is really something, because they do it with, they're just mean about it, nasty about it. They want to hurt these people, as if that's going to get them some help. In the end, I don't think they're going to get very much done. Craig has mentioned that the parts of the government they go for are like, pennies on the government budget, and not really very much. If they're really going to do anything, they've got to do it by going after the big entitlements. And they're not going to do that. I mean, and they wouldn't know how. I mean, you don't do that in a week. You don't restructure Medicare so that it's preventative instead of pay for service in a week. That's what you got to do if you want to cut Medicare costs. You're not going to somehow change all. I mean, they're good at algorithms, but I don't think they can figure out the right algorithm to make Social Security safe through the end of the century by having some 19-year-old figuring out a new formula that doesn't include cutting benefits or raising taxes. So it's not quite as easy. And I just want to end where what Craig mentioned. I mean, the price of eggs. What all this frenetic activity does is it diverts this government from doing the things that ought to be doing.
Yeah.
Trump came in because of inflation, and Biden was slow to react to it. You can make an argument, and I probably will shortly, that a lot of the Biden spending programs in 21 and 22 may have actually enhanced inflation. The problem with doing all these frenetic, politically motivated things that rev up your base, that keep you in the news, is, and particularly when you have amateurs doing it, is that you don't pay attention to the problems that really affect ordinary people.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's going to happen is that people are going to be disappointed. Craig, I think, mentioned this, but I saw this morning that for all this frenetic activity on the border and all the big rhetoric and, all this stuff about his mass deportation, nothing's different. There's no change in the outcome. So in the end, he's going to be judged on the same things that Biden was judged on.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't do any better, he's going to have the same outcome. But the other most important point is that this may last for 3 or 4 months, but then there are going to be a lot of members in the House who are going to be worried about how this is going to affect him in 2026. And he's going to find that it's a lot harder to do anything, and that as much as he intimidates and will try to intimidate members, there are going to be plenty of them who are going to feel that Trump is not their route to reelection, and he will pay a price with them as well.
Well, that's all we have time for. Al, from Craig Fuller, thank you so much indeed. We will see you next week.